Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rebel Collective podcast. I am your host, Laura Eisenhower.
And I'm your host, Drago Reid.
I'm really excited about our guest today, Daryl James. Anyway, we are the Rebel Collective. We're just two rebels that have been deplatformed, deleted, shadow banned, persecuted, and muzzled. And we are leading other rebels and pioneers in their fields and giving them a voice that can't be silenced because we are the resistance. And so, Drago, take it away. I know you have the first question, and tell us about our guest.
All right, everybody. Welcome to an exciting new episode of the Rebel Collective. Today, we are about to embark on a thrilling journey into the realm of classified projects, extraordinary human capabilities, and the secret space program. Our guest today, Daryl James, is no stranger to the shadows cast by government secrets and covert operations. With a past shrouded in mystery, Daryl brings firsthand experience that will make your heart race and your mind question the very fabric of our reality. Imagine a world where ordinary individuals possess incredible strength, heightened senses, and extraordinary agility. A world where boundaries of human potential have been pushed to the limits and beyond. Today, we're delving into the mysterious realm of super soldiers. These covert operatives, often hidden in the shadows, are rumored to possess advanced technology and abilities beyond our wildest imaginations. But where did they come from? How were they created? And for what purposes do they serve? Brace yourselves as we pull back the layers of secrecy and explore the origins and implications of the super soldier phenomenon. But that's not all. In the vast reaches of space, far beyond what the public eye can see, another secret lies waiting to be uncovered. The existence of a clandestine and classified space program with whispers of advanced spacecraft, secret missions, and encounters with extraterrestrial civilizations have captured the imaginations of many. Today on the Rebel Collective, we will dare to venture beyond the boundaries of Earth and delve into the mysterious secrets of the secret space program. Are governments and organizations concealing knowledge about our true presence in the cosmos? What role do these super soldiers play in the covert space operations? Join us as we explore the uncharted territories of the secret space program and unravel the enigmatic threads that bind it to the world of the super soldiers. Buckle up, my friends, because today we are shedding light on the hidden, revealing truths that lie beneath the surface. Get ready to enter a realm where science fiction meets reality and where ordinary becomes extraordinary. This is the Rebel Collective, and our journey into the world of super soldiers and the secret space program starts now. Daryl D. James enlisted in the United States Navy on January 24th, 1999. He served 7 years, including 1 year in Iraq with the Naval Mobile Construction Battalion 7, which is the NMCB 7. In 2007, while stationed at the Royal Air Force Base at St. Maugen in Cornwall, United Kingdom, he passed through what he had thought was a metal detector. It was, in fact, a classified technology that measured every biometric signature he had, including his IQ, which was measured at 195. He was soon recruited to the Joint Secret Space Program and guaranteed a position as a pilot in Solar Warden, the fleet that monitors our solar system. After a miscommunication with a 9.5-foot Reptilian, he was sent to the mines of the moon. Welcome to the show, Daryl.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right, man, let's go ahead and start at the beginning. Were you ever identified at birth to be in the programs?
No. And whenever I was in the program, when I first was asked to join the program, the first class petty officer, who he was the petty officer of the watch, and he was the guy who showed me all my stats, all my scores, and things like that when I walked through the machine. He actually asked me if I was homeschooled because he was surprised that I wasn't picked up when I was younger. So it seems like it's something that, I guess if you have high enough, intelligence scores and things like that, they can get you when you're younger. But yeah, he said, well, I guess you just slipped through the cracks, because he was surprised about that.
I was actually surprised that you wasn't identified at a younger age, because you had said in previous videos that at a super young age, you can view different timelines and see people's thoughts or hear people's thoughts and see their auras and stuff like that. Those aren't normal gifts.
Yeah. Like when I was very young, I remember it wasn't until middle school, I think, where I lost it. And it was, I don't know, it was almost like I could see a swirling at the top right-hand corner of my vision. If I focused in on someone, or if I even thought about choosing a different path in life, if I was going to do something else in my life, and I would see this swirling, and if I like looked down, looked at the swirl, it would become almost like a tunnel, and I could go into the tunnel, and I could go faster down the tunnel and kind of skip the more mundane events, or I could stop kind of in the tunnel and look around and see the more important events that were going to happen, whether it was my life or someone else's. And that's how it felt to me. That's like how it worked.
You as a kid, when did you realize that those weren't normal gifts?
I don't know, but it was always just kind of normal. I mean, it was normal in the sense that I don't know if my father could do it. But my dad he was a, an older man, and we didn't call it telepathy or anything like that, but we used to just talk, like sitting on the couch, watching TV or eating or things like that. My mom could do it slightly. My sister forgot as she got older. I remember my father even told me that. And he said that most of I had half brothers, I had half siblings as well from his first marriage. And he even said that all of them forgot except for my oldest brother, Larry. He was the only one that still remembered how to do it. And I ran into other families and things like that. Like I knew a family from church called the Hinkley's, their last name, and they could do it, and they were really good at it. Yeah. So I would meet people. I met a girl named Jen when I was in high school. My sister's friend, her mother could do it, and she could do it. Things like that.
So did you actually always want to be in the military since a kid with these kind of abilities and gifts?
I don't know. I mean, one of my uncles was like an original frogman, and another one was an original SeaBee from World War II. Because my dad came from a family with a lot of kids, and he was the youngest of I think about 7 kids, and I was the youngest of 5. So it was just yeah, I had 2 uncles. So yeah, if I was going to join the military, it would have been the Navy. But yeah, I mean, I thought about it like any other, young kid.
Is that why you took the SeaBee path, to be the second person in your line to do that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that, and because I mean, I probably could have got something else, but I had a marijuana paraphernalia charge when I was 19, and that all I could really do was be like a boatswain's mate or a cook or like construction. So I chose construction.
Can you talk to us about just how you ended up in Solar Warden and then had this altercation with the Reptilian and what that was all about?
I don't know if on the bio, I thought you said 2007, but I remember I was in Iraq in 2002. So I got into St. Maugen in 2003. And but yeah, it was just I went to England because I wanted to get COLA, which is cost of living allowance. You got twice as much money for living in England. Plus, then you got isolation pay because this base was out in the middle of nowhere, like tin mining and sheep country and stuff like that. And everybody did it. I remember talking to the guys who worked in the garage with me. I didn't work in the underground base. I worked at a garage. But everybody had to escort civilian workers into the underground base, and it was a way to see your scores because you walked through this machine before you would go into the underground base. And yeah, it was only my first Monday, or I got there on a Saturday or Sunday, and it was Monday or Tuesday. One of the guys came up to me and said, "You have to escort some civilian workers into the underground base." So I thought, all right, and I went to the underground. I went to the quarterdeck, which is the lobby of a military base. It's where you check in and where you go on leave and things like that. And there was a sliding glass door, plexiglass, and it slid open. And there was a British guard with a green beret and a rifle over his shoulder. And it was stainless steel tables in front of him. And there was a metal detector like you would see at an airport, where it was rectangular sides, a roof, and it had a little ramp you had to step over that had black and yellow caution tape on it so you wouldn't trip. And the guys were Siemens. They worked for the corporation Siemens. And the first one said, "I'm not going through that bloody thing." So I thought, well, I don't want to go through it either. So I went to walk around as well as them. They all walked around it. And the guard said, "No, you walk through." So I walked through. And I mean, I was actually had to be escorted by someone else. I didn't have a high enough clearance to go in this base by myself either. So somebody was in front of me telling me where to go. And then they dropped us off, and then he gave me a walkie-talkie, and I watched the guys fix a pump. And there were white, blue, and red lines on the floor, like tape. And white was secret, and it went to the fewest places, just down main halls. Blue was top secret, and it went to more places, and then red went everywhere, and it went into certain hallways that were just like pitch black, where lights weren't on. And yeah, I watched these guys. I left, and then yeah, I had they call it balls to four watch in the military, which is like 0-100 midnight to 4 in the morning. And I was at the quarterdeck, and I was like, yeah, rover watch, where a guy walks around base, make sure everything was okay, things like that. And the petty officer of the watch, he was a first class petty officer. He's a heavyset guy with a blonde mustache, blonde. And he pointed at the computer screen, the monitor. He was sitting in front of a computer, and he pointed at the monitor, and he said, "What do you think about that?" And it was like a black and white picture. It looked like of like a stereotypical gray. And it looked like he was looking up at a camera in a room. And I said, "Where did you get that off the internet?" And he said, "No, look." And by that sliding glass door, there's like this window, and it was about 6 inches. It stopped about 6 inches from the ceiling, about 6 inches from the floor. It was very big, and it was like a separate room behind this window. It was right next to that sliding glass door, and it was just like this little gray. It looked like, you know, they call them drones, but they're like worker bees. They do preventive maintenance on the ship and stuff like that. But it was like khaki. It was like a light brown, and it had like a hue of pink to it, and it had like 2 folds of skin that went from its tear ducts like down its cheekbones. Big black eyes, very long fingers, like it had to keep it like in C shapes when it walked, or would it drug its hands on the ground. And palms are very long, fingers are very long. And he said, "Do you mind if it comes in here?" And I said, "Does it mind if I look at it?" Because I didn't know if it was like a dog or an animal. I didn't really know what to think. And he said, "No, it doesn't mind." And it walked in, and it walked in real robotic, and it just kind of stopped sudden right in front of me. And it just let me look at it for a second, and that same guard was right behind him. And it had like a silver pistol in its hand, like a little silver pistol. And I kept on saying gun, like I thought it was a gun. I just got back from Iraq and everything. I thought it was a gun. And he said, "It's not a gun, the first class." But then it said it like in my head, "It's not a gun." And it put its hand out, let me see it. And it just looked like a piece of like, I don't know, polished metal, but it was like a pistol shape. And yeah, and the guard, he had his rifle down at the ready. So it was like, like I thought, well, I guess the rifle's for me, not really it. And I sat back down, and it took apart like a Dell computer, just like a government issue, like you'd see at a DMV, like Dell computer that was sitting on the ground. And that pistol was like a drill, and it just took it apart, and it didn't have to guide it or anything. It hit every screw right there. It was like bullseye every time. And it was dropping the screws in its hand, catching it. Then it slid the top off, put it down, popped out 2 gigs of RAM. It went to the table. I had to reach up. It was short. It grabbed 2 more gigs, slammed them in, slid it back down. It still had the screws in its hand, and it kind of had to like snap it. And it was every time it snapped its hand forward, it caught it like right between the 2 fingers every time. And it set the screws and put them in. And then it just let me look at it, and I looked at it, and I got kind of bored with it. When I looked this way, and it moved its hands for me, and I looked at its hands. It was just there to like let me observe it. And it walked away, and the first class said, "Do you think you'd work around something like that?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess. You know, I don't see why not." And I think that's what it was for, to see if I would run away or I'd try to attack it or what. And it was just like a test to see how I'd react to this thing. And he showed me he showed me the monitor, and he goes, "You're smart." And I said, "You know, well, like how?" I said, "Like how smart?" And I said 160, 150, 160 IQ, and he goes, "More like 190, 195. And he showed me like these lines going across the computer that were color coded, and there were 2 like by themselves right at the very top. Yeah, and then there were some more, and they kind of went up and down a little bit, but it was everybody on base, everybody who had, you know, they all walked through that metal detector. And that's what that thing that looked like an airport metal detector is. That's what it was. And he was telling me things like, you know, you smoke, 'cause I smoked cigarettes at the time, and then he said, "But you don't have any clots because you drink," because I drank at the time. And so he was just telling me all this stuff, and everything, that machine was, it told you everything when you walked in. And he asked me if I had any tattoos, and I said no. And he said, "Good, the Germans don't like tattoos." And I said, "Germans?" And he said, "Yeah, there's Germans up there." And yeah, and he was asking me if I had any hobbies I liked. He said, "With your scores, you'll be a pilot, so you have plenty of time to practice, you know, any kind of hobby you like." And I said, "Well, I used to play classical guitar." And he said, "Well, that's good. They'll like that." And he was just saying day. And every time I said, like, you know, "What are you talking about?" He really didn't go into great detail. And I remember I asked him, I said, what are they? And he said, we don't know. He said, all we know is they've been here as long as us, and we got into a war with them a long time ago, and we were helped. We had outside help. And one of the agreements of them losing the war was they had to live underground. They were driven underground. So they've been like infiltrating religion and, you know, different kinds of propaganda to get through us that way, you know, over a long period of time. But yeah, that's like how it started in the beginning.
So you described it as like a light brown kind of gray looking being. And it was
Yeah, it looked like your typical gray. It had the big black eyes and everything, but it was like, yeah, it was like, it looked like a light brown, like a bit of like
so
a bit of pink
you
as well.
described it more as like a mechanical drone without a consciousness behind it, right?
Yeah, that's what they seem like, or they have maybe a shared consciousness. They're just kind of like organic machines. Yeah, they're kind of like organic machines.
So what was your first thought when you came face to face with this thing? You described it in previous videos as kind of darty, just moving mechanically really fast and precise and stuff like that.
I was like really scared. Like I was freaked out. I was nauseous. I remember I got up and I was pacing back and forth in the room, and it made me it upset me that the first class petty officer was just so nonchalant about it. Like he didn't act like it was a big deal. And I kind of like had like a we should go tell this on the mountain kind of attitude about it, where we should tell other people about this. And it upset him me saying that. And he said, you should go take a walk. And I took a walk. Yeah, my knees were shaking afterwards, and I was, yeah. I even remember he said, when I was looking at it, I was just staring at it for a long period of time, and a tear came down my face. And he said, why are you crying? And I said, because it lets me know. And he said, know what? And I said that we're not alone. And he said, oh no, we're not alone. I remember the guys like the next day that they were told, you know, about, you know, me seeing it. Like, oh, I heard you cry. And I was like, I wasn't crying. It was just when you have so much adrenaline in your body, and it was just like my eyes were just, I was just flipped out. Like I can't explain how scared I was. And yeah, and it was so amazing. I mean, to see this, it was really amazing. Because I had seen these things on the cover of books and stuff, but I never really gave it any thought. I really wasn't into things like that. I don't know.
So basically, you passed your initiation rites.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. Yeah, and I walked through the machine, and then on a I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you. Before this, I had keynote. I forgot to tell you that.
That was
I
my
had
next
three.
question.
Yeah. I forgot to tell you that I had three Friday watches in a row, and the third was when I actually joined the program. And that's not common to have like midnight to 4 in the morning, 3 watches. But yeah, I'm sorry, like the first Friday after I walked through this machine and escorted those guys in, the first Friday watch I had, I saw Mike Aquino at the quarterdeck when I first walked in, and it wasn't the same first class petty officer, it was a different guy, and I just saw him and he was just looking through some papers. I think it might have been my scores or whatever.
Did you just say
It
Michael
seemed like he wanted
Aquino?
to talk to me personally.
You said Aquino,
Yeah, Colonel. Yeah, Aquino.
and he wanted to talk
Yeah,
to
and I
you?
noticed him because he had the eyebrows and stuff. Yeah, and I saw him on Oprah when I was a kid, so I knew him right away. And he was just, you know, he just kind of said, how are you doing? And he asked me where I was from, and he asked me how I liked England, and it was just kind of like that. And I don't know, he kind of like, I didn't want to be around him because I knew who he was, and I just said, excuse me, and I went on another round. It was just something really quick. It was the first Friday. Then the second Friday is when I actually saw the drone. And then, you know, that Saturday after the watch, and I woke up in the morning, I had this guy named, everybody called him Lando, because he liked Star Wars, like Lando Calrissian and stuff like that. And he's, you know, first generation American. His grandfather or his parents were from Mexico and stuff. And he had like and I thought it was weird in his room. He made models, and he loved like German World War II stuff. He had like Nazi stuff all over. Like he had like little toy soldiers, and he had like Panzer tanks and Tiger tanks and things like that. And I thought it was weird. I was like, what is this? You know, this Hispanic guy has all this Nazi stuff all over his room. I thought it was strange. And yeah, he asked me, he's like, what did you think? And I said, what? And he said, you know, big black eyes, long spindly fingers, kind of creepy looking. And I really did kind of forget. It was almost like something so crazy that I don't know. I just didn't know what he was talking about at first. I said, "Oh yeah, right." And I said I forgot about it at first. He said, "Yeah, some people do. It's just so unbelievable." And so yeah, guys knew about it, and they're like, "How does it feel to be the second smartest guy on base?" And I said, I never really thought about it. And they're, nobody could believe it. And they're like, "Why did you become a SeaBee?" "Oh, I have a marijuana paraphernalia charge." They went, "Oh." And so yeah, and then on Monday, the executive officer, which is like the second in command, came to the garage, and one of the guys came up and he said, "Hey, the XO wants to talk to you." And I said, "Is that normal?" Because I just got to the base and I thought maybe he wanted to greet me in person. And he goes, "No." He's like, and I thought maybe I'm in trouble. I don't know what happened. It's usually when you're in trouble and they don't come to you, they usually call you to their office. But he came like to my garage and came for me personally. So then we were walking away from the garage, and at first it was a small talk, like, "How do you like the base? How do you like England?" And I was like, "All right." And then we got to the sidewalk, and then he said, "How does it feel to have 195 IQ?" And the guys on base, that guy or Lando told me that the guy who had the highest IQ was him, was the XO. He had like over 200 IQ. And I found out later, yeah, he was like from the future, and he was like genetically augmented in the womb and stuff like that. He was like a time traveler. And yeah, he said, "How does it feel to have 195 IQ?" And he said, "This close to 200." And he's like, "Well, it's never enough, is it?" And I said, "Well, you'd know, sir, wouldn't you?" And he said, "Oh, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Who told you?" And I'm, "Oh gosh, I shouldn't have said that." And so I wound up telling him. I mean, I was just like, everybody knows. Everybody was like coming up to me and asking me, and I can't believe, they're all amazed that SeaBee had like a 195 IQ, and everybody was coming up to me and talking to me and stuff. And at first he asked me if I ever heard of a Project Solar Warden, and I said no. And he's like, "Well, have you ever heard of the United States Navy Secret Space Program?" And I said no, but I think I could. And he asked me if I heard of Barry McGinnon. This was less than 2 years ago. He was a guy who hacked into NASA. He was from Scotland, so it was like in the UK area. So it was like a current event. And he found the file called Project Solar Warden, and he found things like names, ranks, and social security numbers of off-world officers. And off-world, you find out later in the program, means like ET. That's what off-world means. And pictures of cigar-shaped craft over the moon, things like that. He said it's all real, all of it. And he said the only reason that they didn't extradite him from Scotland was because if they put him on trial, it was already so public, he would have been able to call witnesses, and it would have blew the whole lid off Solar Warden. So he asked me if I, wanted to join the program, and I didn't know. I remember I asked him. I said, "Will I be able to have children?" Because I figured 20. Told me about the 20-year back. Well, how he told me was, he said, "You do yours, we put you in the program, you become you do your 20 years, we age regress you 20 years, send you back in time 20 years, wipe your memory, and you wake up in bed like nothing happened." And I said, I can believe in time travel, and getting my mind wiped, but something about age regression I found really hard to believe. And he said, with what you just saw talking about the little drone, he said, "You find that hard to believe?" And I said, "Well, touche, sir, but yes." And he said, "Well, it's true." He didn't really want to go any further and try to get me, to believe it anymore. And yeah, he told me that, and he said I'd become pilot. He said, with your scores, I guarantee you'll become pilot of a 4-kilometer long starship, and you'll make commander. And I said, "Well, will I get any money for this?" And he said, "No." And then I said, "Well, 20 years is a long time. Will I have children?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "With your scores, you'll be expected to have children." And I said, "What happened to my children?" And he said, "They'll be taken care of." And I said, "Well, will I be able to see them again?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, that sounds very sad." And he said, "Mr. James, I promise you," he said, "you won't remember anything." And he was calling me Mr. In this conversation, which is like what other officers call each other, Mr. He wasn't calling me petty officer anywhere. He's calling me Mr. Like he was already referring to me as an officer. And So I thought about it, and I said, well, you know, that machine you walk through, it kind of told you everything. It told you if you had clots or anything like that. I said, when I was a young man, you know, when I was 19, my father died of something called a widowmaker. We had a clot in his heart, and no warning, he just died. I said, if we had a machine like that, it would have saved his life. And he started talking about things like, you know, age regression. I mean, you know, population control, things like that. And I said, you know, well, there's got to be a side. I said, there has to be a side that wants to release it to the public. And he said, you mean like a trader? And I said, no, sir, just has to be a side. And he said, well, there is. And I said, well, if you can get me on that side, I said, I'll do it. And he said, okay. And we walked a little bit further, and he shook my hand. I saluted him. He was walking away. And he said, one more thing, Mr. James. He said, there's a reptile that's going to escort you in the underground base. And he said, and he's big. And I didn't know what that meant. But guys in the base, every now and again, we were playing like the video game Halo. And they talked about how we were just waiting for the next game. And one of them brought up like, hey, did you see that reptile today in the underground base? Another one said, yeah, he was big. And, you know, in my head, I'm kind of thinking like, I guess there's, you know, because this was before, you know, this was like probably right before or after I saw Kino, and I hadn't seen the drone yet and things like that. I hadn't seen anything yet. And he said, yeah, and he talked funny too. In my head, I thought he was talking about, they were talking about like maybe there's caves underground, because I hadn't been in there yet. And, or, you know, well, I'd been in there, but I didn't go very far. And I was like, well, maybe, you know, there's caves there. And I thought it might have been like, they're talking about monitor lizards or iguanas, something like four-legged lizards. And I said, there's lizards that talk to you. Like I said, what? There's lizards that can talk? And he's like, yeah, you're new here, right? Yeah, there's lizards that can talk to you. And I said, well, they walk on all fours and they just talk to you? They said, no, they walk upright like us on 2 feet. And I was like, what? Like, I couldn't believe that. It was really hard to believe. I thought they were just messing with me because I was new on the base and everything. And, but yeah, I mean, I volunteered for the program, and then I had another Friday watch, and that's when it came up, you know, like the moment of truth kind of thing. And I remember I was in the TV room one time, in the TV break room area of the barracks, and across the hall there was a guy. He left his door open, and the XO told me that people were doing this. It was like people were trying to like acclimatize me to what was going to happen to me to get me kind of ready. So they were just telling me little things here and there. They were told to do that about the reptile and things like that. And this guy from across the hall, he left his door open. It was like he was talking to someone else, but he wanted me to hear it. And he said, you're going to be put into a room. You're going to be put into a chair in a room, and you're going to be strapped in. And he said it's a density chamber. He said an artificial density chamber is what he called it. And it pushes you artificially from 3rd to 5th density. He said most of the ETs we have dealt with are 5th density beings, and they're much too fast and smart for us to work with them. And he said you'll become stronger, faster. Your IQ will go up 200 points, and you'll become more of a collective. Like when you're in a group of people, you kind of become that group. And yeah, so I heard that, and then yeah, then Friday came, and there's the same first class petty officer, and I was in my Johnny Cash's, like my working blues. I had like all black on, like the man in black. I had black shirt, black tie, black pants, and he told me to sit down. Well, actually, he had me sign like a book like that, like so many papers. And at first, I was trying to read it, and he said, if you read this, we'll be here all night, you know. And it was saying really weird stuff. That's why I was reading it. It was saying things like, I don't know, something like the consciousness of the first party now belongs to the second party and things like that. It was a really like bizarre contract. And so he's like, you know, you'll be here all day. I was like, all right, I don't know. And he said, just sign the damn thing. You're already back there. So when he said that, he was like meaning that, you know, I had already come back in time from the 20-year back, and I was being age regressed. Like I was already in the underground base. He's like, you're already back there, so just sign the damn thing. And, you know, he was pointing, and I signed it. You know, sign here, date here, sign. He flipped the page for me, did it again, did it again, did it again. It took about 10 minutes just to sign all this stuff. He got on the phone. He said, "All right, send him in." And he said, "Sit down." And I sat down. I was at the quarterdeck. I was just sitting by the desk, and it was just he said, "All right, go with him." And he pointed at that same window, that really large window where I saw like the drone, the little gray. And there was this really big reptile, and he was dark brown, and he had like ridges going down his head, like almost like mohawks. And he had like gold alligator eyes. His face was flat. He just kind of had slits, and his mouth went across and then straight up. And he was in like a tight blue uniform, like a blue suit.
Can you describe him as like 9.5 feet tall?
Yeah, it was about 9.5 feet tall. Yeah, I had to like crouch in this room. You know, once someone gets over 7 feet, it's kind of hard to judge them because you're not used to seeing something that big. But yeah, I would say it was about 9.5 feet tall, and it was just so big, and it's like his shoulder muscles were like beach balls. It was huge. It was really, really big. And where I stood up and I said, Jesus Christ, I said, he's not going to eat me, is he? He's like, no. If he wanted to eat you, he's much stronger and faster than you. He said, if he wanted to eat you, he would have done it by now. And I kind of like, I don't know, I was just kind of trying to borrow time to think about what I was going to do. I was thinking about running. I didn't know what to do because it was just so big. It wasn't like the other one where I could just kick it across the room. It was huge. And so I stood up, and it came out of that room and then came out of the sliding glass doors and just stood there and waited for me to come. And it had like this small young kid as a guard, a different guy. I found out later he was an off-world German, but he was wearing like the same kind of beret and stuff like that, kind of like English attire. And he had a rifle. And so I got up and I walked with it, and it was walking, and we immediately went down one of the halls that had no light, like one of the only red line halls. We were walking down, and I remember there was like big open rooms we came into, and there were things like bicycles leaning against the wall, and like golf carts. Like if somebody had to go deeper into the base or something, they could just jump on a bike or a golf cart and go deeper into the base. And this kid kept on hitting me in the back, kept on butt stroking me with his rifle. And I remember I said, like, I'm not looking around, please stop hitting me. And he did it again and again. I remember I kind of just said to myself, if he does it again, I'm going to throw him on the ground. And he did it because I didn't realize the situation I was in yet. And I just thought it was just some English guard that was just messing with me. And did it again, hit me right between the shoulder blades. I turned around, I grabbed his weapon, and I threw him on the ground, knocked the wind out of him, and I took his weapon and I shook it over his head, and I said, if you hit me with this one more time, I'm going to shove it up your ass sideways. And I heard, like, behind me, I heard this really deep voice say, leave us. Like, the way it kind of talked, it seemed like it talked really deep the first couple syllables, but that last syllable, like, it had to push out. So it's like, leave us. Like, it kind of did that. And he got up, like, looked at his gun, looked at me, and I just held it out, and he grabbed it, and he, like, took off. When I turned around, it was, like, right there. Like, it made sure it got right in front of me, and it was, like, peering down, and I could see his eyes over his chest muscles. And it was just huge, and it was kind of just flexing all of its muscles to let me know how big it was. And I remember the first thing I said that came to my head was, I apologize. Oh, yeah, because when I said, is he going to eat me, it heard me, like, telepathically, even though it was behind glass. And I could tell because it sighed, like it had this big sigh in and big sigh out. And then first thing that came to my head in this situation when he was looking at me was, I apologize for what I said before. You're much more civilized than him. And his eyes were squinted. They don't growl, they don't like snarl, because they don't have any, at least this kind, the working warrior caste kind of reptile, they don't have any muscles in their face. So they just kind of look just one emotion all the time. But only way you can tell if they're mad at you is that their eyes like get small, like he was squinting his eyes at me. When after I said that, his eyes got big and normal again, and he just turned around and he said, follow me. I followed him. I walked a bit deeper into the base. And then eventually, like, he walked up like this, like catwalk upstairs on the side of the wall, and there was like an airtight door with like the wheel on it. One of those doors you see like in ships and submarines and stuff like that. And he walked in, and there was a chair there, and it was huge. It was way bigger. It looked like it was made for one of them. And I found out later that this technology was invented by reptiles because we have the ability to go up one density because we're third density, and the fourth density is kind of like spirit world, astral plane. So we have the ability through meditation and stuff like that to go into the astral world. But they don't have the ability naturally to go up one density. So they're fourth density, but they can't get up to fifth. So this density chamber was actually something they developed, they built as a way to compete with like fifth density beings because they don't have the ability to naturally go up one density. And he told me to get into the chair, and it looked like a gas chamber chair. But when I was young in school, they had us, it was like the DARE program. It was like, don't do drugs. It was like an anti-drug program that Nancy Reagan started in the 80s. And they showed us like a gas chamber chair in a trailer, the police did at the elementary school I went to. And it really scared me. Like it really disturbed me to see this chair. And this thing looked just like it almost, but it was bigger and it had holes in it just like a gas chamber chair. And I thought, like, I'm not sitting in that thing. Because I thought it was going to kill me with the sealed door and everything else. I thought it was a gas chamber. I thought it was going to kill me. And it grabbed me by the shirt, threw me in like I didn't weigh anything. And I was like struggling to get out of it. And I think it just headbutted me or something, kind of knocked me out. And I remember my arm, when I came to, I was out for a few seconds. When I came to, my arm was in and my leg was in. And I started struggling to get out again. And it put its hand against my chest, and like its fingers were up here, but his hand was like down here, and that's how like big he was. And he just pushed me back in, and he said, and he leaned forward, and he was like growling, and it sounded almost like an alligator kind of mating call, where it was like you couldn't really hear it at first. You could just feel the percussion in your chest. It got closer to me, like I could hear the growl, and then he said, "Don't make me hit you again." And I jammed my thumb in his eye because it was like right, really close to my face. I didn't know what else to do, and it kind of leaned back, and I saw like a tear come down its eye, and it just, leaned forward and collapsed my chest until it pushed against my heart, and I just blacked out. And then I woke up, and all the straps were on me, and I was, kind of freaking out. I remember he said, "I'm sorry I have to do this to you." And there was like a panel or something on the same wall the door was, so I couldn't see it. I just saw his peripheral, and he was just doing something. He walked out, he closed the door, he tightened the wheel, and I remember I was hyperventilating, like I was trying to make myself pass out so I wouldn't feel the gas or whatever. That's how convinced I was this was a gas chamber. But then it became like, I don't know, it was almost like an out of body experience. It hurt a bit, but it felt like I don't know, like that weightlessness, cold, and then release. It was almost like that feeling you get when you feel like your consciousness kind of slip out of your body. And it felt almost like that. And I came to, and I saw three guys on a bed. There was a bed on the floor. It looked like a mattress, but it was a big mattress, like it was maybe a king size. It was laying on the ground. And they looked like three guys that got picked up from the club. They were wearing like club clothes, like maybe three English guys. And they were laying on the ground. Like one had a button-up long-sleeve shirt. Another one had like a motorcycle jacket. Another guy had a polo shirt. And I saw like the reptile's back was turned towards me. And I saw a guy look like a Gestapo talking to him. He was wearing like a black leather coat, and he had his hair slicked back with like pomade. He was blonde, and he had an undercut. And he looked like he was like talking to the guy, but not talking, like he was gesturing this with his hands. And as I got older, I forgot because I got older, and it was just something that I just didn't do anymore as far as communicating with people. And I slid down off the chair, and I remember one of the footrests. It was really high up and big, and it hit me in the back, and it hurt. And I fell down, like I could barely stand. I said, "Can I go to sleep now?" And I fell down to my hands and knees. And I remember seeing the boots come into my vision, and he said, "I should have you executed for what you did to my man." And I just fell over. And, I was losing consciousness. And I remember the reptile said, "It doesn't matter. He can't remember." And that German the first one I saw that hated my guts, he was actually a first-class petty officer on the base. And the XO told me later on that there was a senior chief with a mustache, and he was off-world German. That's what the military calls them, off-world Germans.
So this was
I'm sorry?
So that was a member of Nachtwaffen.
Yeah, Knockwaffen. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, they just call them off-world Germans in the military. But yeah, they were like spies. They're like I don't know. I don't even know if you call them spies because the higher ups know that who they are. You know, like the XO and the CO, they knew who they were. But the S3, who was like the fourth in command, is like the legal officer. He wore glasses. He was an off-world German. He was on my ship. He was actually when I got into Knockwaffen. He was the first officer on my ship. The master chief of the base, who was third in command, he was an off-world German. The doctor was an off-world German, and there were a couple more. But yeah, and yeah, that one first class, he was skinny, or no, he was a senior chief. He was a skinny senior chief with a mustache and glasses, and he went to that guy's room, that guy Lando, and he was like named. I remember, and this was after I came back from the program. This is part of the story, I guess. He was like admiring his models and stuff. His his German like Nazi models, tanks and things like that. And he knew like not just the names, but he was like, that's the P83124. He like knew all the serial numbers, like the exact name to all this stuff. And I thought it was weird that this guy loved it, like the senior chief, but he was like an off-world German, and I didn't even know. And maybe that's why that guy, because he worked in the underground base. That's probably why he collected all these models and stuff, because he knew what they were. And yeah, I remember. I got pushed up into fifth density artificially. I was really out of it. I remember the reptile was carrying me under his arm like a duffel bag, and he was right on my bladder, and I had to go to the bathroom. I kept on saying I have to pee, and he wasn't listening, and I just passed out. And then it was a bright light we went through. I remember the bright light, and Robert told me later on that was a looking glass technology, which is like you can either observe or look at the looking glass and observe something without people knowing that you're there, or you could step through the looking glass and you just arrive at this. It's like a portal that you can observe as well. And it was taking me into the moon, there was like bases and stuff like that the Germans have and the reptiles have inside the moon. It was taking me inside the moon.
Did you go to the LOC?
Sorry?
Did you go to the LOC? Was that one of the locations?
LOC.
Lunar Operation Command on the moon, one of the Nazi bases?
I was in the mines. I was being punished in the mines for what I did to the reptile. Yeah, they were gonna what Robert told me that they were gonna do to me, which is something that I guess that happens to people sometimes. If you have connections to the 20-year and back, like the secret space program, they were going to put me 20 years of hard labor in the moon and not wipe my mind. And I guess most people commit suicide after that because they beat you pretty bad. It's pretty horrible. But yeah, like I met a girl there that I knew named April who worked on the base, who was just an IT. She was like she fixed computers and stuff like that. But she was a nurse. She volunteered for the program. She was a nurse in the 20-year and back. And I met her. I wound up becoming like involved with her. And when I was walking,
you actually asked her to marry you, right?
April? No, not April.
I thought you were engaged.
I knew April for a few months. Yeah.
Which one were you engaged to before you went to before you met the newer woman on the German colonies?
That was the woman from the German world. Yeah,
I remember Faru.
Yeah. Well, Helen, I believe her name was Helen. I think Robert told me her name was Helen, the German woman that I was engaged to. But yeah, April was this because I didn't know any of this stuff, and because when I eventually I guess it goes on later in the story, but Robert told me all these people that I knew, and he was telling me all these names and stuff because I don't remember. Names are difficult for me. I remember situations, things like that, and if it wasn't for him telling me that, I wouldn't remember any of the names. But yeah,
20...
I just
Yeah, so the 20 and back was, help me understand the role of, and I've researched this, but just from your own words, the role of Solar Warden, and you had a choice in being on the side of those that would disclose technology. You said, how were you given I mean, how was that? What is the Solar Warden relationship with like Dark Fleet and like this greater war, and what Solar Warden's like role is? Has that changed?
Well, yeah, I could give you. Well, it's kind of like real warfare in a sense. It's kind of like you know, when you're in a war, like when we're in Iraq, you're kind of making backdoor deals with people who are like the enemy and stuff like that. You're giving certain people money and things like that. It's not clear cut and it's defined as like people think. It's just like a regular war. And I remember I asked Robert, I was like, why do you deal with these things as far as the reptiles before I left? And he said we have a contract, and he didn't go any deeper than that. But he said that, you know, I guess we signed a contract with the reptiles, and that's why we have to give them so many people every
Had
year.
the is that the Griata? Have you heard of the Griata Treaty?
No, no.
Laura knows a lot about that. It was a treaty signed by NJ-12, and they basically said that Dwight had actually signed it, but it turns out he didn't. And that allowed the Nachtwaffen and the German breakaway civilization, and it allowed them to basically abduct people in the United States. And one of the questions I have is the reptilian that actually escorted you, was he Draco at all?
No, he was one of they're like actually halfway decent. He was like a working kind of warrior caste. He was more like a native of not of Earth but of our universe. I think the Draco are more like were expelled from another universe by like the higher density beings into our universe. But I mean, there's reptiles naturally everywhere, like you know, in our universe and things like that, and they just get recruited by you know the royal cast, the Draco, and things like that. That they recruit all kinds of different species of reptile, and they're not all necessarily cruel like the Draco. I mean, I would say most of them are kind of decent. Like they Dracos, they love suffering. They kind of have the whole loosh thing and things like that. They like that. Well, you have the other reptiles. You know, maybe they might eat someone, but they don't do it in the sense where they just want them to see him suffer, kind of thing. You know, that they might kill and eat somebody, but it's more like a force of nature in the sense that like an alligator eats someone. You know, it's not like a kind of a. It's not for cruelty. It's because they have to eat. So yeah, I don't think he wasn't Draco. He was just like a worker. I think he was maybe a warrior. The warrior cast and like the working cast look similar. The ones that I remember, they're usually dark brown like that. And but yeah, like I got into space. And what else was I gonna? Oh, something else Robert told me. I can go later on into that. He told me a lot of stuff like later on. But yeah, I mean, I remember that. I remember being with April, and I remember like you know first time first time I met her, like she showed me all this stuff. Like she was doing my physical when I first got into the program, and she had like a smart glass pad, which are like the pads, and she was like able to like take an image and pull it out, and it was like a humanoid, and she was able to spin it around and like go into the heart and expand her hand, and you could see the heart beating. She could see my circulatory system and my brain, things like that. And it was all this stuff. She was just, you know, and some of it was just like, you know, put your fingers between mine and squeeze, like a grip test and stuff, just to see if I was with it. And she knew I smoked and things like that. She said, "Oh, you smoke?" And she's like, "We could fix that." And I said, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah." And she pointed, she tapped her tooth, and she said, "Yeah, I had one of my teeth knocked out, and I had an implant." She's like, "But they grew it back." She's like, "They could fix anything here." And I remember like being with her in Plymouth. We went to the movies one time, and I was with a group of friends, and we went to Plymouth, which was the nearest theater. This was in England, and she said that. She said, "Yeah, I got my tooth knocked out when I was young." She had like a titanium screw, and I asked Robert. I said like, "Well, when they age regress you, what is like your tooth just fall out again when they regrow it?" Because I was telling her that. I was like, "I remember that. I remember her telling me that on the moon, and I remember talking to her in Plymouth on back on Earth." And she said, "Yeah, I got the tooth knocked out." I said, "So when you get age regress, does everything just you know, has everything just come back?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Your scars come back." He said, "If you're missing a tooth that falls out." I said, "Well, how do they put the implant back in?" And he told me the drones do it, which was those little gray or those little grays. He said because they can do anything like exact accurate, just like a machine. So they re-drilled the titanium back into her skull and they put the tooth back in. So yeah, anything that the part of the age regression process is it's almost like it takes like an exact like a photograph of your body exactly the way it was and everything comes back. Like even though your scars might have been healed from going in the med beds and things like that, all your original scars come back whenever you come back from the program and you get age regress. But yeah, I was with her, yeah, and we were in bed together, and I fell asleep, and she was with me, and then all of a sudden I just woke up. That's how it happened, and I was back in England. And I remember the guy, the first class petty officer, said some people will remember the first day or two, but nobody really remembers anything after that. And yeah, and I remember I stood up and I said like, I was with a woman, like what happened, what happened? And I stood up, and on the chair in front of my bed, well, there was I guess the first class petty officer, the guy who talked to me, the blonde mustache, he carried me back to my room after I was done with the program. They wrap you up in like a blanket, like a military blanket, and he wore a black hoodie, black pants, and black sneakers. Because I remember one time I was hanging out with this English guy. It was like 3 in the morning, and his barracks were right on the main road. And he said, "Look," he said, "Stop, look." And like we were watching TV, and I turned around, I looked out the window, and I saw somebody like in a black hoodie carrying it looked like a body wrapped up in like one of those wool military blankets. And I said, "Should we help him?" You know what I mean? Because I thought it was just somebody that had like a dead body like on the base. And the guy looked at me and he said, "No," he said, "It's too late for him. We can't help him. Like it's too late. He already came back from the program." He didn't say that, but like now that I knew what was happening, that's what it was. Somebody that's how I came back. They like wrap you up in a blanket and they put you back in your bed. And yeah, like I had a chair in front of my bed, and my uniform was laid out on the chair, like my black uniform, working blue uniform. And it was something I wouldn't have done. I just would have put it in a hanger and hung it. Yeah, everything was laid on the chair. My shoes were pushed under the chair, my dress shoes and everything like that. And I still had my socks on, which I didn't do, and I still had like my t-shirt on. And I stood up and I was like, "What happened to me?" And I ran my fingers through my hair and I had like burnt stubble in my hand. I took off my shirt and I felt like my chest hair and I had burnt stubble. And I looked there was a body mirror in the room, and like I was really in good shape. Like, I was very toned and a lot more in shape than I was before. And I like couldn't figure out what was happening. I walked out of the room and there was this guy who he was one of the guys there when they were talking about a reptile when we were playing Halo in the room. And he said, "Congratulations, you made it." Like he was waiting for me in the hallway, and I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, 20 years is a long time. A lot of people don't make it. I didn't know what he was talking about, and I just kind of like, carried on with my life, and it was just weird. It was just really weird. Difficult to explain. But there were certain things that were strange too. Like I remember one time I was folding my clothes and I started to sing, folding my clothes, and I thought, "Wow, I'm a really good singer now." Like couldn't figure out why I was such a good singer. And I remember one of the guys had a guitar in the barracks, and I picked up the guitar and I just started playing it, and I hadn't played in years, and it was just like second nature. Like I could really play. And you see in like these movies and stuff like that, like Jason Bourne, where people can do stuff they don't know what they can do. They take it up again like it's second nature. But for me, it was kind of scary. It was like, oh my, like how am I doing this? It was really just like I don't know how I can do this stuff, and it was kind of disturbing. So I stopped. I remember one time I was like in the break room area, the smoking room area behind where I worked, and I was just standing there, and this guy named Rob was there. He's just some guy who worked with me, first class petty officer, and he said, "Why aren't you smoking?" And I said, "I don't know." Like it was almost like I was just going through the habits of smoking. I said, "I don't know." And I grabbed my pack of cigarettes and I said, I've had this pack for 2 days, and I've only smoked 5 cigarettes out of it. And it was just like, it was weird. It was strange. But yeah, I mean, that's how it happened. And I used to go to a bar on base, and it was right next to the garage where I worked. And there were always this group of people there, and nobody else really went to this bar on base. But there was always like 3 guys who sat at the bar, and then one guy, I call him the goon, who had a shaved head and he was pretty big. And I walked into this bar, and this was I lost Saturday too. That was something else. I woke up on a Sunday, and I had no idea how I lost Saturday. I joined the program on Friday, but it was just like part of like I lost the day, and I woke up on Sunday. So like I think on Sunday evening or maybe Monday evening, I went to the bar, and the goon was there, and he's like, "Hey, it's the king of the Tibetans, man." He's like, "How are you doing?" He's like, "Michael Aquino." He's like, "Aquino fucked you up." He's like, "Yeah, man." He's like, "He was really messing you up. You shouldn't have done that to the reptile." And I said, "What are you talking about?" Like I had no idea what he was talking about. And the other guys who were sitting at the bar said, "Shut up. You're not supposed to say that to him." And I said, "What are you talking? Like I don't know. What do you mean? What are you talking about?" He's like Tajet. He's like, he asked me. He said, "You ever hear of Billy Meyer?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Well, you should look that up because they're based off them. That's what the Pleiadians." He talked about the Pleiadians, the Billy Meyer thing, stuff like that. And I looked it up on a computer and I saw him. And he said to the other guy, he's like, yeah, he can play guitar though, right? He's like, yeah. And they all went, yeah, he kind of can play guitar. And he's like, yeah, it sounded like two different instruments. And I said, that's harmony and melody. He's like, I didn't know you could play guitar like that. I said, yeah, that's how you play classical guitar. And yeah, so I would go to this bar and I would talk to these people. I would try to, I would try to like kind of stay kind of sober, a little bit sober, and I would just sit there with a beer for hours or maybe 2 beers for hours. And I'd wait for this guy to get drunk because he would just tell me stuff sometimes, almost like a part of my life that I didn't know was missing. I didn't know what was happening and stuff like that. And we were watching a Tom Cruise movie one time, I remember, and he said, hey, Tom Cruise, I got to meet him the other day. He was in the base. And I remember the guys who just worked in the underground base, they all knew that. They all knew that Tom Cruise came to the base. And I figured he might have been, studying for a role in a movie or something like that. And I said, well, why do they leave him into the underground base? Because I've only been in there once. And they said, I don't know. And the guys who were at the bar and the goon, they were all Satanists, is what it was. So they were like in the clique. And yeah, he said whenever Tom Cruise came to the base, he bought some adrenochrome off him. And I said, what's that? And he said, it's this drug you get from kids. And that's kind of like all he was. And I remember one time they were all together, this was later on in the bar, and they were all really laughing and talking very fast. And I thought they were on cocaine or speed or something like that. It seemed like they were talking a million miles an hour and they're really like laughing and stuff. And I said, what are you guys on? And he said, we're on chrome, man. I said, chrome. And he said, adrenochrome. That's what they call it, chrome. And I didn't know what he was talking about. And he's like, we get it from kids, man. And I thought they were like messing with me or something. I didn't really know what to think of it. So I just kind of dropped it. I really didn't know what to think. And he actually tried to kill me and stuff like that because of something I told him in person when I first came back from the 20-year and back. But I didn't remember at the time because I was drinking and stuff like that. But anyways, I was getting into trouble. I don't know what was wrong with me. I went through a really horrible thing of depression for months when I first got back to the program. I remember one time we were at a 4th of July party and the XO told me, well, we were serving hot dogs and hamburgers at the 4th of July party. And the XO came up with his daughter. She was pretty. She was blonde and pretty. And he said, Petty Officer James, I'd like to introduce you to my daughter. And I talked to her and tried to ask her out, but she turned me down. And then he asked me, do you play guitar? She walked away and he started talking to me. I was handing him a hot dog and a hamburger or something like that. And he said, do you play guitar? He said, the blue. And I said, I used to. And he's like, well, you should take that back up. And he said, have a good day. And he left. I remember one of the guys that worked with me, he said, dude, the XO is trying to hook you up with his daughter. I was like, yeah, I know. And it was just weird. Yeah, it was bizarre. And so you got to a point where when you're getting out of the military for good, you get to talk to the executive officer, or you get to talk to the master chief of the base, the executive officer, and the commanding officer, the 3 top guys on the base. And you can pretty much say whatever you want. It's like a tradition when you're getting out. You can call them an asshole or whatever, but you can't threaten them or anything like that. But it's just one of these things they do when you're getting out for good. And I talked to I saw the master chief, and I didn't know he was an off-world German, but I saw him. He was overweight, and he had a mustache, glasses. And then I saw the XO, one of the XO's office, and he stood up really slow, and he looked very sad. And all of a sudden, he just appeared at the other end of his desk. He had a very large, like mahogany desk, like the XOs and COs have. And he just appeared at the end of his desk. And I remember I was thinking, did I have a stroke? Like it was like I lost 3 seconds of my life. And he put his hand on the desk very slowly. And all of a sudden, he just appeared right in front of me. And I took a step back, and he took a step forward. And he said to me telepathically, can you hear what I'm saying to you? And in my head, I said, yes. And but it's almost like they want something physical, so it's just not the voice in your head. And he said it again, can you hear what I'm saying to you? And I shook my head, and under my breath, I said, yes. And he kind of sighed, and he said, what do you remember? And I said, I remember being on these mines and stuff like that. And I said, I remember was with this woman, and he said that was April, and, that I worked with and stuff on his base. And then he said, "What else do you remember?" And I thought about it, and it was like almost like my memory, the way it worked. I remember the very beginning, and I remember the very end. But as far as the stuff in between, it took me time to remember all that. And I said I remember a woman with silver hair, tall. She was sitting down, and she had big blue eyes and then big high cheekbones. She had a boy on her lap, and I kissed the boy on the head, and then I kissed her. And he said that was mother. He said, "You had a son with her." And I said, "I have a son." And he said, "You have dozens of sons and hundreds of daughters." And I was just like, "What are you talking about?" Like, I really had no idea what he was talking about. I had no clue. And he was trying to kind of fill me in, because he said that you have to go back to the chair. He was trying to convince me. He's like, "Daryl, you have to go back in the chair. You have to go back in the chair." And I said, "Why?" And he's like, you did something. It's called a 20-year embark. He said, "You joined something called 20-year embark." He said that most people who have memories of the 20-year embark, they commit suicide within the first 6 months. He said, "This is going to be difficult for you." He's like, "You're going to be sharing a consciousness," is kind of what he said, "with the other you, and it's very difficult." He's like, "If you get your mind rewiped, it'll just start all over again, and it won't be like that." He's like, "But right now, you're sharing a consciousness." And he told me I remember it in real time, is how he put it, which means like as I make memories up there, me down here remembers those memories. So it's not like I remember like I could remember the future of my past life up there. It's almost like as he's creating new memories, I'm remembering those memories as they happen at the same time. And because it's like we're sharing one consciousness. And yeah, he was just started telling me all this stuff, and um, he was looking down my timeline. And he could tell I wasn't going to go back in the chair. He's like, "You don't go." Like he was like predicting my future kind of thing, because he was like fifth density. He was a higher density being. He told me he was from the year 2580. He told me that he came from like a world of like Mike Pence, where everybody looks like Mike Pence. He said that Mike Pence came from that same timeline and was trying to sabotage his mission, but he wasn't successful. He told me Mike Pence is no good. He's
You
into
said that
pedophilia.
you had basically said that basically everybody looked like Mike Pence in that timeline, that weird brow, no emotion, the squinty eyes kind of body type.
Yeah, like that constant scowl, like the way Mike Pence has. He looks very, very always has a scowl on his face. Like Robert had that same kind of scowl. He told me that yeah, he said they have black hair, usually brown eyes, sometimes blue eyes, like that turned up kind of nose, pale skin. He said when they reach, it was 50 years old, their hair begins to salt and pepper, and by the time they're 60, it turns pure white, and then their eyebrows turn pure white by the time they're 70. He told me their average life expectancy was 110, and I said, "That's awful." And he said, "Yeah, we didn't reach our true potential." He said, "That's why I'm here, to make sure we reach our true potential." He said he said the Tigetans, they live over 3,000 years. And he told me that. And the thing is I was talking to him the way I'm talking to you guys right now. So it's like a different memory. So that's why I always go back to like Robert. People ask me like, "How do you have so many memories? How do you remember so much?" Because a captain in the Navy just told me everything. Because he thought that I was going to, he was trying to make sure that I didn't kill myself, because he knew I wasn't going to get my mind rewiped. And it was almost like he was trying to let me know, like, "You're not just making this up. Like, you're not crazy. Like, this really happened to you." And he was just telling me all these things. And he was trying to, because he cared about me. I remember I said, "I knew you, didn't I?" And he said, "You were like a son to me." So yeah, he like cared about me and stuff. I knew him pretty well. And he was telling me all this stuff. He was telling me the stuff about the future that would start happening. He said the world's going to be on fire, is how he put it. I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You mean like New York City's going to be on fire?" He said, "No, not like that." He's like, "There's going to be wildfires everywhere in Australia." He told me that the koala bear would become an endangered species. He said that the eucalyptus trees were actually genetically engineered to cause forest fires to go out of control. He said that the trunk begins to boil the sap, and it's flammable and explodes, and it goes everywhere. And he said, yeah, he said like a third of Australia is going to burn down. He said, there's going to be forest fires all over the West, the Midwest. He said there's going to be riots. He said people are going to start burning cities down. And he told me about this Q thing. And he said that he told me the Q thing was real. He said it's real at first, and then it goes away for a while, and then when it comes back, he said that's not true. He said, but it doesn't matter because it's going to start happening already by this time.
You're saying it was
And,
hijacked? The Q movement was hijacked when it came back, is what you're saying?
Yeah, he said it's not. He said after it goes away for 5 or 6 months. He said, and then it comes back. He said, but that's not true. He said that's not real. He said, but originally the Q thing was real. And he was telling me that. He told me about the guys from South Park. He brought that up, and he asked me. He said, "Do you know the guys from South Park?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Remember when they went to the Oscars?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Trey Parker and Matt Stone. They went in drag and they were on acid when they went to the Oscars." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "That's because they hate them." And I said, "What do you mean? Like, who do they hate?" He said, "Hollywood." He said, "They hate them." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because they're scum." He said, "They're all scum." And he said that the military actually approached them, and they did the adrenochrome episode that came out on South Park. He said that was like a military, like the white hats in the military came up to them and gave them like a basic script, and he called it soft disclosure is what he called it, like something like a way to plant seeds in people's heads to get them ready for like what's happening in the in these underground bases. And I remember I asked him, I remember seeing children. I remember seeing a spider. It was like this big spider guy. And he had the torso of a man, but like the bottom half of the spider. And it was flesh, and then it just became hair at the elbow, like wiry black hair. And he had like those prongs, those claws, like a spider does for hands. He had those fangs for a mouth. He had like black eyes that went up like the sides of his head. It became smaller and smaller as they went up the sides. And then he had like just a tuft of black on the top of his head. And they took me into like a deep part of the base, like caverns that were like only the reptiles and the grays and the elongated skulls used, things like that, to be tortured by a Kino for poking that reptile in the eye. And a Kino was actually some sort of a black reptile, like a onyx black, shiny, pitch black. He wore like a red hood and a red robe. He had like fangs. Sometimes he would have fangs and reptile eyes. He kind of changed and shifted though, because he was fourth density, which is like, spirit world. I remember Robert was telling me, he said we should stop talking about a Kino now, because we were talking about it in the office before I left the Navy. And I said, why? He seemed kind of spooked. And he said, Kino's fourth density. He said, if we talk about him too much, we could conjure him. And I said, conjure him? He said, yeah. He's like, we need to stop talking about him because he'll find out. It was really weird. And but yeah, and then he was telling me about the guys from South Park, and he told me that the adrenochrome thing. I remember when I saw this spider humanoid chimera thing. His name was Max, and I asked Robert, was it smart? He said it had about a 60, 65 IQ, so somewhat. And I said I remember seeing kids in cages, like in front of this cage that he was in. There was like these kids in dog kennels that looked like, and they were naked and very pale white. Their hair was matted, and he said, "You ever see that movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You remember the adrenochrome scene?" Yeah. He said, "Well, that's where they get it from." He said, "There's kids in underground bases." He said, "They came from the moon." He said, "Most of them. Some of them were kidnapped, but most of them, there's brothels on the moon, and women will like that's your only incentive to work is to have sex when you're on the moon." And I guess if the scores aren't high enough, they take the babies and they put them in these underground bases.
And you had said
that
you would needed to have an IQ of at least 200 to enter the moons voluntarily, right? And the only way to get in is punishment.
No. 110. You have to have 110 IQ, at least 110 IQ to get in. And that's just working in the mines. They want you to have at least 110 just to get into the mines of the moon. But that's just like the very lowest part of like us. The secret space program is working in the mines and things like that. But yeah, and he said that they electrify the cages so the kids are unconscious. That causes the adrenochrome the adrenaline to go into the body. They strap them down, and then they give them like a spinal tap right at the base of like their skull, right where their spine first meets the skull, and they extract it that way. He said they take a pint or two at a time, and I said, well, some of these kids were only like 3 or 4 years old. I said that would kill them. He says it does, and he said that they put them in something that looks like a wood chipper, and they feed them to the other kids. That's what they eat. He said they're feral, He said they'd never been held or anything like that. He said if she would have got out of the, because this girl like scurried up to the cage and like slammed her hands on the cage. It like startled me. They were carrying me because I was unconscious when I first came back from the program, and it startled me. And Robert said that if she got out of the cage, she would have attacked you. She would have bit you because they're feral. And yeah, and he was telling me that, you know, everybody's in on this. Like he told me Tom Cruise came to the base. He said he's the main distributor for the Scientologists for adrenochrome.
Do you think that do you think Michael's position with the blood ceremonies, you think he was the direct source because he was doing the same stuff at the Presidio?
Yeah, well, I asked Aquino if the Presidio was real, because that was big when I was a kid, and I remember that. And you know, that was one of the reasons he was on Oprah, was to try to save face, you know, because the whole Presidio thing. And I asked the reptile that with him if that was true, and he said, yeah, it was true, and it was covered up and all this stuff. But yeah, one of the guys on the base said that you know, they came up to me when I came back from the program, and they're kind of asking me things whether or not I remembered stuff. They were trying to, you know, the XO had him. He even said people were basically tailing me to see if I had any memories. People were acting like they were my friends, and they were actually just spying on me. And he said, you know, Johnson, I don't remember the guy's name. He's like, yeah, he told me that there's like a machine that can extract the consciousness from a person, but they can't do it when they're too young because the body is almost like a puppet, like a vessel that this other consciousness uses. And he said it has to be done before puberty. So that when they're around like 9, 10 years old, they put them in this machine and it can extract consciousness, and then another being can kind of project their consciousness into that body and move it around like a puppet. And that's what Aquino was, because he told me, he said, yeah, he's like, I went into the underground base, I did a 12-hour shift. I went past the break room, and there's a long window in the break room, the underground base. He said, I saw Aquino just sitting at the end of the table, staring at like a blank TV that was off, just staring. And he said, I did a 12-hour shift, and I came back, and Aquino was just sitting in the same exact chair, just staring at the same TV. So that's like when the consciousness of the reptile came out of his body, and it just sat there and waited to be, you know, used again. It was like a body without a soul. It just didn't move. And that's a big thing. It's like, it's not the mind, it's the soul, you know what I mean, that kind of controls everything. You know, it's not the brain or anything like that. It's like you have to have a consciousness to make the body move, and the consciousness has memories. It's not really, your brain just kind of takes information from the consciousness, is what it seems like. It's almost like a way to interact with the body and brain through the consciousness. But yeah, he was telling me that, and he said that what's his name, Tom Hanks was like the godfather of adrenochrome. And he told me he got caught in Australia. That was that whole thing. He told me there's going to be a flu, you know, and people are going to lose their mind. And it's just a flu, he said, but people are going to lose their mind. And he says it was like started by like, you know, the black hats and things like that. But the white hats are going to use it as like cover, as like a fog of war kind of thing. They're going to be able to do things. They're in this confusion. So they're going to let it happen, and they're going to use all this stuff. And yeah, he said he got caught in Australia, was executed. He said he wouldn't turn on his friends. He said what they do is, he was using words like, he said they're vampires, and then when they don't get their food source, they become ghouls, and that's how like he put it. And he said that
Go ahead. He said
yeah,
that
he said that they would lock him in a cage, like in a cell. Like they wouldn't torture him or anything like that. Like Tom Hanks, they would lock him in a cell, and they would say, you know, you want this adrenochrome? You know, like, we'll give it to you, you know, if you turn in your buddies, if you turn in your friends. And he said, like, they only need it once a week. And then he said the second week, they go through, like, horrible withdrawals. And then by the third week, they usually die, and they age dramatically. He said, if, like, you've been doing it for 5 years, like, within 3 weeks, you'll look 10 years older. Like, it's almost like you double in age, like, depending on when you started doing this drug. And he said, you know, they really want it for the stem cells, but it's the adrenaline gives it like, you know, a high. It's like an extra, like the icing on the cake kind of thing. And he said they try to get the same blood type, but it's so rare and so expensive that you can't always get the same blood type. But if they get the same blood type, they inject it because it's more effective. But if they can't get the same blood type, then they just drink it. And yeah, he told me that that with Tom Hanks. He told me that what was her name? Oh, I forget. From Poltergeist, the blonde girl from Poltergeist that died. Oh heck. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That's the platinum blonde hair. she was in Poltergeist, and was it George Lucas? He told me that George Lucas killed her along with Henry Winkler, who played the Fonz, and two other movie producers. He said that they this is kind of graphic, but he said that they sodomized her with an Oscar trophy. And he said, how many kids do you ever hear dying from their intestines spontaneously rupturing? That's what she died from. She got like
George Lucas did this.
Yeah, not Lucas. I'm sorry, Spielberg. Steven Spielberg. I
Right.
get him confused. I'm sorry, Steven Spielberg, because he was the one who did Poltergeist. Yeah, and Henry Winkler worked with her on Happy Days. She played the Fonz's, like
Heather O'Rourke. Right.
Heather O'Rourke. Thank you. Yeah, Heather O'Rourke.
Okay,
Yeah,
but are these clones though? When we see Tom Hanks in a, you know, are these clones if they've been executed?
He told me stuff about deepfake. He said they have technology where they can fake things. He said they have really advanced math technology. He said they have clones, and yeah, he told me all that stuff is real. Yeah, this was back, you know, in 2000. Well, this was 2004. I joined the program. No, this was probably 2005 before I got out of the Navy for good. It was 2 years afterwards after I came back from the program, because I did 2 years in England, so you know I still was living on this base with all these people knowing I joined this program, and they all knew that I was tortured by a Kino, and like none of them really said anything or told me anything like that. And the guys that I worked with in the garage, they had no idea, but it was the guys that worked in the ground base, they all knew. And yeah, and he told me that Michael Jackson, he was just telling, I asked him, I said, is it true what they say about Michael Jackson because he knew all this stuff? And he said, yeah, it's true. He said, but it's not his fault. And I said, what do you mean? He said that Joe Jackson, his father, raped him his whole life and then pimped him out to the music industry. He said he actually made more money off Michael Jackson by pimping him out than he did off the Jackson 5 albums. And then I'm sorry, Barry White tried to come forward about this. He knew about what happened to Michael Jackson when he was a kid. And he said that's why he died so mysteriously in a hospital. He said that, you know, Barry White, when he died in the hospital, not even his own daughter could see him. Only his doctor and his lawyer could see him. He said that they were poisoning him and slowly and painfully and recording it to show like other people in the industry, like if you ever try to come forward about this, this is what's going to happen to you. So they're like, you know, Barry White was about to come forward about all this stuff. And he told me like the thing with the September 11th, when that happened, I asked him, you know, that wasn't a, you know, that couldn't just be a plane, right? And he said, no, he said it was mini nukes. He said they have nukes like the size of like hockey pucks that they could just put in and blow things up. So they put it on the, you know, on the structure of the building itself, and they blew it up with like mini nukes. And he said that it was because, you know, because you had that thing with Donald Rumsfeld where, what did they lose, like $6 trillion or something like that? And then like the next day, yeah, they lost trillions of dollars. He said Solar Warden was taking that money. He said they took that on purpose. And he said that that's when this was supposed to happen, everything that's happening right now. He said, but then they did September 11th, and it made everybody kind of stand back. They were like letting them know, like, hey, we have nukes hitting all over the earth, and we could do this anytime we want. We could just start blowing stuff up if you don't leave us alone. So they had to like kind of like back up and like wait and try to figure out where all these bombs were to try to, you know, get rid of all these bombs. So he told me that's what September 11th was they were about to blow the lid off of everything, start everything back up, you know, have a brand new economy and everything else. But, you know, they blew up the World Trade Center to warn them, like, we could do a lot worse than this if you don't leave us alone. So they had to kind of stop and start over again. But yeah, he told me that, you know, everything's going to be way better after. He told me all about the, you know, the flu, he called it, you know, the flu, and everything's going to be on fire. He said they start off at the lowest level possible, which I thought was kind of interesting. He brought up. And he said they're going to start with comic books. He said they're going to kill off Spider-Man. I said, they killed Spider-Man? Because I read comic books. He knew, like, they kept real close tabs on me. And I got comic books on the base. I don't read them anymore, but on the base, I had a couple comic books delivered to me on the base. And he's like, yeah, they kill off Spider-Man and they replace him with, you know, a half black, half Hispanic kid. And I said, no, they kill Spider-Man. He said, well, he's not the main continuity, but yeah, they killed the Ultimate Spider-Man. I was like, oh, I read that one before. I was like, that sucks.
You,
And
you
he's like,
said,
yeah. And he said, then they're going to work their way up the, huh?
go ahead.
Well, he said this is how they work. They work at the lowest level possible. So he started off with comic books. Then he said they're going to make horrible remakes, all these remakes. He said they're going to do like a Ghostbusters remake. It's going to be awful. He said they're going to be awful on purpose. And he says what they're trying to do is destroy your heroes. They're trying to demoralize you and destroy your heroes, the things you grew up with as a kid. And they're going to try to destroy them, you know. Little Mermaid and everything else, Star Trek remakes. They're going to make remakes. They're not going to be very good. They're going to be awful. They're going to be awful on purpose. He said, and then they're going to work their way up to statues, and then they're going to start tearing your statues down. He said, because that's how a communist revolution works. That's how the Satanists work. They do everything at the lowest level possible, and they stand back and they wait for the reaction of the public. And if they don't react, then they go a step further and they wait and they see the reaction, and then they go all the way, and then they go to the statues and they start burning cities down. And he said, yeah, all this chaos and stuff like that, this is all being paid, you know, by Satanists, things like that.
And
Which
then
are like the negative aspects of Earth.
right. And then like rigged elections. I mean, so did you say though that they said things are going to get better? I mean, where are we as a humanity in what the white hats are doing, what more positive forces are doing for the planet? I mean, where do you see us and where do you feel we're heading? Is there a bifurcation?
Well, he told me about, you see sparks in the sky, gold and silver sparks, and they would claim it was like you know, things from space stations, parts from space stations or spaceships coming back down and hitting the atmosphere. But he said that's them. He told me it was the reptiles and the grays being shot down. He said they're trying to escape, and they're scared. He said they're not acting rationally. They're really scared. So they know the whole Earth is on lockdown. The solar system's on lockdown. Nothing's allowed to leave. And Solar Warden is a big part of that. And yeah, he said you're going to see these sparks. They're getting shot down. He told me that when it does happen, he said it's going to be so much better. And he was almost like in tears. He was like proud of himself. He's like, Daryl, you don't understand. It's going to be so much better. And he told me about his timeline. He told me like what was going to happen originally before they changed everything. And I said, how do they change everything? He said, Kruger's helping us. And I said, who's Kruger? And he said, it's like a Germany from an alternate dimension. And he said, or an alternate universe. He said, you work with Kruger. And I didn't remember at the time. I still really don't remember working with Kruger very much. But he said I worked with him. And he said that originally when Hillary Clinton won the election, what's happening right now in different parts of the world, you know, like Europe, United States, as far as people coming from other countries coming in, things like that, it would have been much worse the way he put it on Hillary Clinton's first election. And he kept on saying my ancestors. He said things like my ancestors were openly murdered and raped and things like that, and the press said nothing and the police did nothing. And if we tried to fight back, like if somebody broke into our house and we killed them, we were the ones that were arrested. We were the ones that were killed. And he said in Hillary Clinton's second election, we got into a war with China that was intended to be lost. And he said the United States just wasn't bombed on key targets, nuclear attack. He said the United States was a carpet bomb with nuclear weapons, and it fell. And then he said they started 100-year breeding programs. It went to like 100-year intervals. And first it was like nations outside of Asia. Everybody bred together. And he said they took the lighter skinned people and they put them into Asia. And then they started interbreeding with the Asians for 100 years. And I said, what do they do with the darker skinned people? He said, they killed them all off. And then for 100 years, everybody kind of like, I don't know, marveled at how great they were. They were one people now. And then they realized they made a mistake. And he said that we couldn't ascend any further. He said that we couldn't go past fifth density. And he said, if a world can't keep evolving, it dies. He said, so my world was bound to die. And he said that what it was is they tried to extract a certain gene, and it made everybody kind of look like Mike Pence, is what it was. He said it was the Anglo-Saxon gene, he called it. And it made everybody look like Mike Pence. And that's why everybody looked like that in the future. And he said he had to go back in time and fix it. And I said, well, what about your mother and father? He said, my mom's gone, my dad's gone, everybody, my brothers and sisters are all gone. He said he accomplished his mission. And I said, well, what happened to you? I said, well, what are you still doing here? He said, I don't know. And he didn't know why he was still there. I guess because he was in our timeline. I guess they protected him. But yeah, he said that eventually when, it's hard to say because he said that, things could happen, things could change in the sense that he said it can be prolonged, but it can't be stopped. So it sounds like right now they're prolonging it as long as possible. And he said that, we're going to have things like med beds, said all that's real. He said the first thing you would see are smartphones, which are based off the smart glass pad. And I said, what's a smart glass pad? He said, smart glass pad, you remember. When he said you remember, I just kind of had this wave of memory of using smart glass pads. And I had no idea I had this memory. And he went on about, med beds. And then he asked me, he said, where do you think the world's gold's at? And I said, I said Bank of England, Bank of London, because I was living there at the time. And he said, it's in the catacombs of the Vatican. And he said the catacombs, he said the Vatican is just like horrible. He said it was cursed, basically, from all the, he said so many elongated skulls and grays and things like that, and so many child sacrifices. He said that they're going to get all the gold out of the Vatican and basically just implode it, because he said there's so many catacombs, it's so deep, that they're just going to be able to pull the catacombs, and it would just implode pretty much in the earth. He said the Catholic religion will live on, but he said the Vatican, it's going to be no more. But yeah, he said you're going to be able to buy like a brand new car. The economy is going to be so good that you're going to be able to get a new car in 6 months. You'll be able to pay off a brand new car in 6 months. You'll be able to pay off a brand new house or, used house in like 4 or 5 years, things like that. He's like, you're not going to be owned, enslaved by your money anymore. You're going to be able to do things. Everybody's going to be able to take nice vacations. He said it's going to be so much better. And he was very happy with himself. He seemed very assured this was going to happen. But yeah, all these.
I'm sorry, you said something was prolonged but can't be stopped. What were you referring to?
Well, as far as like when all this happened, he was telling me like things like JFK Jr. and stuff like that were still alive. I don't know if I kind of think that what's going to happen next maybe is I think probably Trump and RFK for vice president. That's what it feels like to me, anyways. But yeah, he was saying things like they can prolong it as far as like the negative beings of Earth. They can they're going to borrow money from as many people as they can to try to keep the economy afloat. But the economy is going to have to fall, is what he said. Like it's going to crash. And he told me that Russia would become the world power for the next 1,000 years and beyond. He talked about 1,000 years of peace and things like that, like from the Q thing. He was mentioning things like that. He said Russia would be the world power because, well, what it was, they couldn't figure out who would be the next world power. And they almost got into a war over that. So they brought it down to whoever has the most natural resources. Russia has the most natural resources. And then China will be kind of like the economy, like our currency would kind of go through the Chinese because of how much gold that China has and things like that already. And a lot of this gold will go back to its home countries, things like that. Like, it's just not going to be given to one country. They're going to figure out, what diamonds were taken from Africa. They're going to bring those diamonds back. They're going to bring people, they're going to give everybody's like natural resources back to them. But he said like United States is going to be like the 8th as far as like world power. But he said it's not going to matter because it's not going to be like a Cold War or a struggle or anything like that. Everybody's going to be working together. So it's really not going to matter who the world power is and like that. But
did they say anything about the jabs though, and the bioweapons and the depopulation and just a lot of casualties, or would there be med beds or something to help turn some of that around for people that?
He said it would be hard. Yeah, he said there was going to be a vaccine, and it's going to be no good. It's not going to be any good for you. But he also said, everything. He said we should live a lot longer than we should. So, the chemicals. He talked about chemtrails. The air they poison us. So it's not just the vaccine. But he did say, yeah, he said that a lot of people will die, and it's the sacrifice. He said it has to be hard, is what he said. He said this has to affect our DNA memory. He said, so people are going to have to die. This has to be something so traumatic to just the world consciousness that it will never happen again. He said, we could fix it. He said, we could fix everything right now. He said, but it would just happen again in 100 years. He said, it would just happen again. He's like, but if a population like the Earth's population goes through an extremely traumatic event, It affects your DNA memory, and it makes sure that your children and your children's children will make sure this will never happen again. It's kind of like a monarch kind of brain, it's kind of like a monarch, brainwashing thing they're doing. But they're kind of but he called it DNA memories. He said how it works. Your DNA itself has a memory, and it has to be something very traumatic. And so this is going to have to be difficult. So people are going to lose, loved ones and things like that because of the jab, because of the shot. But yeah, it's going to have to happen. It's going to have to be that way. And otherwise it would just happen again in 100 years. And I remember, and I said, are people helping us? He's like, no. He's like, we're getting some help, recruiters helping us, and Pleiadian, things like that. So, but they're guarding Earth. He said, as far as Earth itself, he's like, we have to take the brunt of everything, because they can't just do it for us. He said they can't drag us over the finish line. He said this is something we have to do for ourselves. We can't just be helped. Otherwise, it won't affect our DNA memory properly. So that was a big thing for him.
But you said the reptilians are scared, or they're locked down. They can't leave. So there is a bit of a panic.
Yeah, he said, and that kind of gave me I don't know, like maybe a good feeling to think that reptiles, reptiles experience fear like anything else. And yeah, he said that our solar system's on lockdown, and anything that tries to escape right now, he's like, they're going to try to escape. I said, why? If they know they're going to get shot down. He said, because they're scared and they're not acting rational. He said we're coming in the underground bases and we're clearing everything out. And I said, will this base be cleared out? And he said, we're working on it. And it was almost like he was looking at it like in a timeline. I don't know, it was time travel, so it was confusing. But he did tell me it would lose the JMF part, which is Joint Maritime Force, which is what maritime being the Navy, U.S. Navy. And he said it would only become an RAF base. He said the U.S. Navy would leave. And that's how you knew they were working to clear out these underground caverns. Because these caverns they're much larger than the bases. There's these ancient caverns that ETs, reptiles and stuff made thousands of years ago, and if not longer, in the Earth, where they all stay. Elongated skulls and everything else are in there as well.
But we're not being really helped. But there are the white hats and forces like that are helping to clear all this.
Well, I mean, he said it's not just U.S. military. You know what I mean? He said the military just got fed up. But this is what he said to me. He said, he put it to me like this. He said there's going to be a coup. I said, coups are bad. That was the first thing I thought. I was like, well, what kind of coup? Which side should I be on? This? He's like, no, Daryl, you're going to want this coup. He's like, you don't understand. It gets bad. And I said, what do you mean? He said, Daryl, they start castrating children. And I said, what? He's like, yeah, it gets bad. It gets really bad. I said, well, how are people going to accept this? Like, that's impossible. Nobody would ever accept that. And something he told me is controversial, I think. He said that he told me about Harry Hay. Have you ever heard of Harry Hay? And I said, no. He said, Harry Hay was the leader of the gay rights movement back in the 1950s. And he said he marched in the front of NAMBLA in the 70s and 80s, which is North American Man-Boy Love Association. It's an organization to make pedophilia legal. He said he was CIA from day one. He said the gay rights movement from day one was funded by the CIA. And he said it was a way to implement he said it was a step-by-step process to implement to make pedophilia acceptable to the American people. He said once pedophilia becomes acceptable to a civilization, it falls quickly, and that's what the whole point. So he said that's how they have to do it. They have to do it slowly, like in 10-year increments. Otherwise, people won't accept it. And he said what's happening right now is they're showing everything they were going to do to us all at once. So it's like all this crazy stuff that's happening right now. It's like, and everybody's like, whoa, this is weird. Even with the Wizard of Brian Mulvaney or whatever with the Bud Light, and nobody's accepting this. They're like, this is too weird. This is something they had planned out for like 30 or 40 years. They're going to slowly implement this stuff. But now they're just throwing it in your face all at once. And it's the white hats doing it. I'm sorry, I kind of went on, but did I answer your question?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, you definitely did. I know. Yeah, gosh, we could just talk with you. I hope we can do a part 2. But we can continue to go. Drago, do you want to?
We definitely need a part 2. I have 1,000 questions for you, Daryl. You've covered so much, and like you answered a lot of my questions. Every time I had a cool question, you freaking answered it. So I was like, good Lord. But definitely a part 2, because I was watching Laura, and she has a question every couple of minutes like I do. So that'd be a really
fine. Yeah, we'll do it that way next time. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Just when I
Any
get
last
going.
things with you, Laura?
What'd you say?
You have any final questions for him or anything?
Gosh. Well,
There's so freaking many, man.
yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
we're moving on a trajectory that eventually will not be so messed up. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I could save my questions for next time. What about you, Drago?
Without going into another deep rabbit hole, I think we should just conclude the show and like do a part 2 and really do a deep dive in it, because I feel the audience has really got to know you. And like, out of all the different shows I've seen you do, you've talked about so many things on this show that you haven't talked necessarily in other shows about. So I really appreciate that, Daryl. That was pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah, of course.
Gosh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, there's too many questions. We'll wait for next time. Thank you so much, Daryl, for spending this time with us today. It's incredible to meet you, and we'll definitely be in touch. And yeah, so goodbye, Rebel Collective, for now, and see you next time.
All right, and that concludes another mind-expanding episode of the Rebel Collective. I just want to extend my deepest gratitude to our incredible guest, Daryl, for bravely stepping forward and sharing his experiences and shedding the light on the hidden realms of the super soldiers, the secret space program, and trauma-based mind control programs. It's really awesome, man. Daryl's compelling story has offered us a glimpse into the darker corners of power and secrecy, reminding us of the importance of questioning the narrative we've been fed our whole life and seeking the truth for ourselves. His courage to speak out has inspired us all to confront the shadows and reclaim our own sovereignty, man. Just remember, Rebels, knowledge is power, and together we can unravel the layers of deception that has been woven around us as we continue on this journey. I encourage you all to stay curious, challenge the status quo, and always question the official story. Join us on our next episode as we uncover more astonishing truths and shine a light on the extraordinary individuals who refuse to be silenced. Remember, Rebels, you are not alone. Together we form the Rebel Collective. Until next time, stay rebellious and keep questioning. Bye, everybody.